Hi, thank you for joining me today for taking the sting out of the migration process. My name is Andrew Harner, and I'm the lead email manager at Scribd. So today's session will be a case study of Scribd's migration to Iterable, hopefully offering some useful takeaways for anyone considering a migration. And I've tried, especially in this, to focus on the practical steps that we took that we felt really contributed to our success, as well as a case study of how Scribd really found value in Iterable after the migration. But first, introductions. So like I said, my name is Andrew Harner. I'm the lead email manager at Scribd. I've been with Scribd for 3 years as the company has grown from 100 people to nearly 300 employees. In my free time, I enjoy bike rides, slow flow yoga, cooking with the incredible fresh produce that we get here in the Bay Area, and playing with Wesley. And who's Wesley? He's my lovely Chihuahua, 8 pounds of fire and fury, and I hope he doesn't bark too much during this presentation. And who is Scribd? So Scribd is a subscription books and audiobooks service. We also host user-uploaded documents. So we have a really significant library of about 100 million user-uploaded documents that we've accumulated over the last 12, 13 years that the company has been around. And a few years ago, the company broke into the premium subscription service space, offering books and audiobooks. So it's really incumbent upon the email program at Scribd to support the general user lifecycle, not just with marketing promotional campaigns, but also with transactional content and product lifecycle. So that includes everything from like I said, acquisition content. You see some of our acquisition mail here, including the event promotional work that we do, along with free trial offers, and bundling partners who come along with the Scribd subscription service, as well as the transactional emails that I mentioned. So the examples here are the gift cards, the receipt, surveys, and all told, we are a pretty high volume program. We have an annual send volume of about 500 million messages, and that's spread across nearly 80 distinct triggered and automated campaigns. Plus, we also support the marketing and product research groups with an additional, typically 2 to 3 promotional and survey emails per week. And I say that to give a sense of scale to our migration, which was certainly the largest project that I've ever worked on. It may be larger than your migration, but I really hope that some of the steps we took can be useful to you as you may be yourself embarking upon a migration. So the first step in that migration is finding the right time to migrate. For us, that was actually a fairly long process. And even though we had a clear understanding of the need, um, which was to reduce the time it takes to create new email campaigns and tests, increasing metrics and attributes that we can use to trigger sends, which, like I said, product lifecycle mail. So it's really important to be able to be flexible in triggering campaigns off of different points in the user lifecycle. For us, that tends to look like account creation, trial, sign up, reading activities, save to list, but also inaction. And having that flexibility really allows us to expand the types of tests and that we can run, and the email programs that we can support. But it's not just about sending emails, it's also having flexibility and depth in our reporting, being able to look at individual user records and have a holistic view of not just their user record, but also all the event data they generated and their email send and engagement history. And beyond just those core product areas, we were also looking for a stronger relationship with our marketing automation platform vendor. So we wanted to find an account management relationship that really focused on success, over increasing their annual sales with us. Um, on the engineering side, we really needed transparent error management and clear API codes because, like I said, we're really data heavy. We do a lot of event data, a lot of user profiles, and time that we spend troubleshooting is time that we don't spend implementing new features. Also, having access to a support team that could respond to us in minutes versus days, um, what was an important need. And then deliverability, which is kind of the least glorious, but one of the most important aspects of email marketing. And we were looking for a platform or a vendor that would really partner with us on our deliverability and be the expert, so that we could cut down on the time that we spent on such a tactical problem. So even though we identified those needs a while ago, it took us 2 years actually to generate the necessary executive buy-in. Um, and I'm hoping that it's less for you. But I really do believe that executive buy-in is one of the most important steps to a successful migration, not just because they can give you the okay, but because they also help you source the right people for your team, for your migration team. And what I found really useful in generating that executive buy-in was demonstrating not just the immediate need and value of the migration, but also having a clear understanding of future business needs and how a migration supports the future plans of the business. So doing that really required working outside of the email team and understanding the needs of stakeholders throughout the organization. So on analytics, product, engineering, and making them part of the conversation with the executive team. And once we had that buy-in, we had soft buy-in, and we moved into a platform evaluation phase, which we had done on an ongoing basis over those last years. But this time, we really moved into it with a clear process. And we actually spent, after we had early executive buy-in, we actually spent 6 months evaluating potential partners. Um, and this slide here gives you a demonstration of the timeline for our migration. So this was about a year is being shown here, starting with that platform evaluation, which I'll talk about for a minute or two. And then we went into the migration phase, which had individual steps of its own. So on the platform evaluation, after we had defined business requirements, and that's where we come back to those future business needs I mentioned. So for Scribd, that included wanting to be able to support push notification, for example, being able to do better multi-channel campaigns, being able to bring in other frequent internal customers to run some of their own campaigns, like user research surveys, like event emails. So the platform had to be both a powerhouse tool that the lifecycle team could leverage, but also accessible to users who might only be dipping into it once every week or two to support their own program. And having a sense of those clear business requirements allowed us to narrow the field from the hundreds of vendors available down to a short list of about 5 vendors who kind of, at a glance, really met our use case. And once we were at that step, we went through a thorough evaluation process with each, which did look like bringing them in for on-sites and video calls with platform demonstrations. Um, for a couple of the finalists, there were executive-facing conversations as well, and really being confident that we were selecting the right partner. And for me, the aha moment on that was not actually in any meeting. It was at Iterable Activate 2019, and seeing the energy at that conference, the focus on not treating it as a showcase for the product, but rather an opportunity for Iterable to share best practices and transferable learnings, the consistency and their value of humility. It really struck me as being a different kind of company from most of the other vendors I had looked at, especially the larger organizations, where this really felt still like a customer first company. And that was the moment at that conference a year ago when I said, this is the company I want to migrate to and work with moving forward. Because one of the things I believe really strongly is that you're not just picking a vendor, you're not just buying a product that you unbox and use yourself, but you're picking a relationship. And that for me was a big part of the search. So once we had arrived at that decision to migrate to Iterable, we had to build out our migration team. So I already spoke to the executive sponsors, And we felt that it was important not just to get the marketing VP's buy-in, but also engineering represented by the chief technical officer and the business as a whole in the form of the chief operating officer, so that we had comprehensive executive support to resource us properly and get buy-in at an early stage on our timeline and plans for the migration. Um, so the implementation team itself was comprised primarily of a lead email manager, an email marketing specialist, an email engineer, and an engineering manager. Um, and that's the core team that I work with on an ongoing basis. That is probably different for you, as is your executive structure. But the key takeaways here are that you need that executive sponsorship and you need to have your core implementation team, which will probably require both marketing or product as well as engineering support. And because of the size of our migration, we also brought in some additional resources by leveraging that executive buy-in. And for us, that was a senior engineer who helped with architecting our data, a technical project manager who provided, who helped us really roadmap and stay on track in the project planning and execution, along with a technical product manager who did an investigation of the push capability, and two QA engineers, because again, we were supporting a large volume of transactional um, and administrative emails. So we wanted to have a really high level of confidence. You may not need such a large team for your migration, but for us, these were all people who provided really tangible value in the migration. Um, so after assembling the team, we moved into the first of those three phases, which was a trial implementation, which we had initially roadmapped for 1 week. It stretched out to two. Iterable was flexible with us on that, which we appreciated. Um, and during that trial implementation, leading up to it, the team met to define a project brief for the trial implementation period, as well as creating a technical doc to define the scope of what we were investigating during that very short trial period. Um, Throughout this, we had preliminary kickoff as well as daily meetings and a retro at the end of the trial implementation, an internal retro to really dig into what we saw and what we liked and what we really wanted to see more on. And we documented this outwards and upwards, especially in a grading sheet that we had developed as part of the kickoff and used to guide our evaluation during that short trial period. Um, so on the previous slide, you saw that there are like three periods to our migration. And we decided to be intentional about that phased decision making so that we weren't trying to commit ourselves to a many years long relationship in a single week or month, but rather take time to get to know the new platform and the team we would be working with. But for that 2 week period, we really dialed in our search and we looked at do the data structures and the API meet the needs of our marketing and software teams? Are we able to send our existing transactional and marketing emails? So not even looking towards the future, but really saying, hey, does this meet our current needs? And then also looking at campaign reporting, because that's something that on the marketing side, we're digging into every day. And based on those three areas, we developed a more complex framework for evaluation, but the output of that was this grading sheet here. And I'm not going to talk through it, but it really tackled all of the key areas that we were looking for and evaluated during that 2 week period. And having completed that 2 week, just a trial implementation, we got live a single email. We brought in a very small amount of event and user profile data, and we arrived at this conclusion. And with the trial implementation done, we moved into a proof of concept implementation, which was a 2 month period. And this was actually where the most important work of our migration, I would say, happened. So during these 2 months, we took a step back and we reevaluated our plans and kind of laid the groundwork through what was actually almost half that 2 month period was laying the groundwork in the form. I'll get into that in the next slide. But we developed a technical framework for that because we were going to be getting live real user-facing emails and by implementing event data and user profile data in Iterable. We also had to do an actual IP warm-up to ramp up to something approaching our real send volume. And a key part in this period, especially the first half of this, was leveraging that technical project manager who helped us develop a really granular plan and hold us accountable to the goals we had set out at the start of this. So laying the groundwork. This lasted for about 1 month out of that 2 month proof of concept implementation. There were a lot of meetings. For me, this was, like I said before, the biggest project I'd ever worked on. And having the assistance of that project manager was really helpful. I developed a pretty detailed brief leveraging like user stories about what we internally needed out of the product. And then on the left, you can also see all of the meeting notes. So we were meeting multiple times a week, especially at the start of this, to plan out how we were going to use this time. And there was a lot of value to this because it allowed us to really align the vision of our team. At this point, there were 5 or 6 people really dedicating most of their time to this project. And we established some principles to the migration that really drove that, as well as a project plan that focused on data, deliverability management, and implementing a variety of emails. And again, like I said earlier, project management, project management, project management. Doing work in advance allowed us to use our time really wisely. There's a quote attributed to Einstein. I don't know if it's real or not, but he said, if you have an hour to solve a problem, you should probably spend 95% of that hour understanding the problem. We had 2 months, but we spent about a month of that understanding the problem before we moved to actually write any code or develop any emails in Iterable. So, like I said, first we developed principles of the implementation. Um, and I think there's a lot of value to that. And we decided that we would do work in advance to understand before we implemented. So planning and scoping in advance, writing briefs, writing JIRA tickets, developing timelines, all of that. We also said that we would migrate as is, except when simplifying provided an optimization in the amount of work we had to do. I initially had the idea, hey, we're going to touch everything. Why don't we just set up a test on every single one of our emails? I was completely wrong. That would have doubled the migration time easily and led to a lot more room for error. So instead, we migrated as is, except for a few exceptions. One of those, I think the best example of an exception was our email marketing specialist refactored our email templates and actually cut the amount of cut the lines of code per email template from 1,200. Oh my God, I can't believe that saying that now. We had 1,200 lines of code in each of our email templates, and she cut that down to just a little over 200 on average, which saved her so much time in migrating 80 templates over the coming months. And that was time well spent. Also, we focus on implementing features and data as needed. So rather than saying, we might need this data later, let's implement it now, we held off and we only implemented user profile and event data in Iterable when it supported a specific email that we were migrating. And doing that allowed us to keep the scope of our work on any given day or week pretty tight, and also meant that we were able to leverage learnings along the way to improve the quality of our work throughout this period where we were getting to know Iterable and also restructuring our data, which changed significantly on Iterable, which rather than being an object-oriented database is a JSON database, and that required us to change how we were thinking and working. And then on top of that, I can't stress it enough, document, 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 communicate, communicate, communicate. I produced more documentation during this than I ever thought I would need to. Probably 100, 200 pages of notes in Confluence, service level agreements around our data, technical docs, all sorts of things, and then communication. We had weekly meetings with Iterable, daily internal meetings, retros, kickoffs, and all of that time, all those meetings were tightly focused, but really valuable to keep us aligned on our plan, on our roadmap, and our execution. And one of the most important areas where we spent a lot of time up front was working with the engineers, and really they led on this, but it was developing a technical framework for how we would be getting data into Iterable from Scrib's backend, which was especially important because our previous platform had been sort of developed on an ad hoc basis without a great deal of documentation. And we saw this as a chance to do a better job. And we we started off with a long period of whiteboarding, 2 to 3 weeks of whiteboarding around this, which was we got a little bit tired of it, but we came up with a plan that we were really satisfied with. It turned out to be the first plan we came up with, but we had to go through 3 different variations to realize the first plan was the best plan. So once we were confident in that, we also aligned on some principles to how the engineering team would be doing their work. And one of the most important parts of that was platform agnostic code. And we hope to not need to leverage this for many years. But if we do migrate again, this will actually be a relatively low lift on the engineering side, where rather than having to edit every single reference to the marketing automation platform, they simply have to edit or refactor a controller. And that's going to hopefully save time for some engineering team 5 or 10 years from now. We also agreed, like I said, on data SLAs. So an example there is, I said, hey, when it comes to user profile data, we want that updated within an hour in Iterable. But when it comes to event data, we want that updated within a minute. And then we also identified certain pieces of data as high value. So that's things like a receipt email or a forgot password email. We want those in the user's inbox before they toggle over to their inbox. We don't want a user to have to wait a second to get that forgot password email. And we developed a parallel um, uh, high value or high importance data stream just for those key emails to make sure that they were flying into Iterable as quickly as possible. So having aligned with our engineers on how the data would be set up, we also developed a project plan. And this is actually, we worked on this with Iterable along with our project manager and the team on my side. And Iterable was really great on this. This is actually their framework for a migration project plan. And they held, there's Wesley, and they held weekly calls with us to keep us aligned on this and keep us on track. And I actually really appreciated this. They highlighted some areas of the product that I wasn't thinking about, their migration team, they do this regularly. This is old hat to them. For us, this was hopefully a once in a decade project, and being able to leverage their learnings was really helpful. And I also want to call out here that they implemented a shared Slack channel with us. And to quote one of the engineers I worked with, this was the most useful shared Slack channel from a vendor they ever had. The team at Iterable was really responsive to us, and they set a tone for the relationship that has been consistent since the early stages of the migration, and being accountable and responsive, and really being there to support our success. Another way they supported our success was IP Warmup. So this was my first time doing an IP warm-up, even though I'd read about it before. And for us, this was a little bit more complicated because of our mail volume. We had 3 or 4 distinct send domains across a dozen IPs, warming up, transactional and marketing mail, both with high engagement and sometimes with low engagement. But they provided the structure and the cadence for us and helped us understand the 250K, which comes bundled and iterable, and get value out of that right away, and do the monitoring for us. So we just had to focus on warming up with these sends. And we focused on leveraging the need for an IP warm up and tying that into the different types of emails that we wanted to test in the migration. So we didn't just test during this proof of concept period. We didn't just test the emails that were easy to set up or our flashiest emails, but really focused on emails that represented the cross section of Scrib's use case for a marketing automation platform. And here you can see personalized recommendations, transactional email, as well as these legally significant administrative emails. Because Scrib hosts user uploaded documents, we have to adhere to a lot of legal requirements, and it's really important to us that we have 100% confidence in these emails. But on the other hand, especially these transactional emails, have a really predictable send volume that's absolutely required for an IP warm up. And as we got into larger volumes, we began doing the recommendations emails, which we were able to batch out each day to continue driving up the volume at a predictable rate. And our IP warm up went off really well because, again, we invested in the plan up front and we were thoughtful in prioritizing what we'd do. little bit more on the project management side, here's that shared Slack channel that was so valuable. I already mentioned that. And just a little bit more of a look at the notes, where we really focused on having consistent attendees, having an agenda for every call, and documenting the clear action items, which you can see from this meeting from August of last year. Not all of the action items got followed up on, but we still made sure to call them out and document them. And having that transparency and accountability was a key part of having success in this tight time frame that we had. Also, something that I did for the first time as a part of this project was I really upgraded my game in Jira. Um, and that was because even in the proof of concept migration, we were supporting what were really several different sub projects represented here as epics. And some of those sub projects had uh, a dozen or more stories, as they're called in Iterable, and comprised each of 5 to 10 tasks. A lot of times these were somewhat standard, like when we migrate an email, we always need to set up a campaign, we always need to set up the back end data, we always need to QA it. But having all of this ticketed out, linked to each other, and then documented in a single view in Confluence gave a really great high-level view. And again, I'm going to use that word again, align. It helped us align our team and keep everyone bought into our vision, and also maintain a narrow scope on our work so that we weren't off chasing this and that, but focusing on the key things that in the end rolled up to our evaluation of Iterable and the ultimate decision to migrate to them. And how did it go? This is me in Europe. While the team was executing those hundreds of JIRA tickets I mentioned, I had a 3-week vacation planned almost a year in advance, which happens to overlap with our proof of concept implementation. I did not check my email once during this because we had invested so heavily in upfront work in building relationships internally and with Iterable. The project team who I worked with really knocked it out. They when I came back, they were ahead of schedule. Everything was humming along, and I just couldn't have been more impressed and happy with my team. So thank you so much, most especially to Sharice, Paige, and Katerina. And shortly after I came back, we had that retrospective internally, and I'm not going to walk through all of these. These are just the areas that we were evaluating to decide if we really wanted to commit Scrib to a multi-year relationship with Iterable. And the short version of this is, I'll read it out loud because I love this. I wrote it. Iterable offers massive improvements, including the JSON data format, Elasticsearch queries, an intuitive, streamlined user interface, and a transparent company culture. The notifications team is excited to complete this migration. And that was the executive-facing summary that we provided, which finally locked in buy-in to not just take a really strong look at Iterable, but truly migrate to Iterable and commit the company to a multi-year relationship. So then comes the work of actually migrating. And good news, this is a lot shorter. Like I said, the real detailed lift and project management came earlier. It came in the proof of concept implementation when we were setting the foundational data structures, the event stream into Iterable, implementing our first campaigns, warming up the IP addresses. And at this point, we really just had to migrate the rest of the program. And we did this, and this lasted about 2 months, actually a little bit less because we came into the holiday period, but it was still a pretty dense 2 months. Excuse me, because we had only migrated about 15 of our existing 80 triggered or automated emails and a similar percentage of the data that we needed to support them. And we, again, took a step back from the work and went through another process of writing briefs, doing kickoffs, generating buy-in on our vision in the team. And this is where we really started to pull in some of the additional resources like the QA team to validate our work as we migrated our pretty large program. You may not need to go into such a level of detail depending on the size of your program, but for us, this was the right level of planning to have confidence. And it was also a chance for me to, again, practice some of these processes around larger project management, which I found a really professional, really valuable professional experience. So I wrote several more briefs, including a very detailed brief on how we were going to migrate each of the remaining 65 emails. We broke all that work out again into discrete tasks and epics in Jira. And by breaking out all that work, we allowed our engineering and marketing resources to work in parallel, uh, which became really important to have that detailed roadmap and task management, because we actually experienced a couple of upstream bugs that trickled down into email around account creation. And because this occurred during the middle of our migration, we didn't even catch it for a couple of weeks. And when we did, our engineering team had to really scramble to address that. But because they have been able to work ahead and separately of the marketing side on migrating emails, we still came in actually a month ahead of our hard deadline, because we had done so much upfront work to define our work. And that is one thing I really do encourage, not just for migrations, but in general for me. That's been a major professional learning over the last year, is the importance of good project management. So we completed our migration actually a month in advance of our true hard deadline. And we took that last month to do some of the cleanup that we had deferred, because during that migration, we really focused on efficiency. So what did we defer? We deferred exporting data from our old platform and closing it down. Doing back-end code removal. Like I said, our implementation for the old platform had been pretty ad hoc, and there were I think our engineer mentioned to me that she had to clean up over 2,000 lines of code in the back end, which was a big piece of work, and then also deferred documentation. Um, so doing especially technical documentation as well as some marketing documentation, to set us up for success over the coming years, as you know, the team continues to grow, and we continue to increase the scope of our product lifecycle and marketing, email testing, and even bring push notification in. So after all that, what came beyond the migration? And I'm just going to share a success where we said, "Wow, this was really worth it." Some of you. So there's been a global shelter in place due to the pandemic, and the way that Scribd responded to this was with a read-free offer on social media. Scribd normally requires a credit card to sign up for 30-day free trial, and we waived that requirement. And the response was huge. We generated hundreds of thousands of signups over the course of a few days. And this is way outside of what Scribd normally sees. And this was both awesome to see such support and such interest in this offer, but also kind of an interesting challenge for us. How do we convert these users who haven't provided their credit card, who aren't going to automatically convert? And the way that we responded on the email team was by setting up a series of workflows. And we actually had to go from being behind the first of these users to getting ahead of them and then staying ahead of them for the duration of that 30-day trial period. So we retroactively implemented an onboarding flow. I'm showing some of that here. We created also engagement and conversion and post-trial expiration retargeting workflows. And the great outcome we found out later was that engagement with these emails correlated to a 300% lift in conversion rate. We did an A/B test and we rolled it out at 100%, but users who engaged with these emails that we spent a month working on converted at 4 times the rate than users who did not engage with our marketing emails, which was incredible. These are the 5 workflows we implemented in Iterable. Like I said, 60 new emails across 5 workflows in less than a month. And the summary from our email marketing specialist was that we couldn't have done this before the migration. This would have been impossible on our old platform to work at such a rate and support so much in such little time. And that was a great feeling to have that proof just a few months after we completed the migration. We also ramped up our testing and have done some other interesting projects, but I won't go into those now. So thank you so much for joining me for this session. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them now in chat, or you can join me in the networking lounge after the session.